Hello and welcome to the Cancer Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Jim Foster, and we are sharing the cancer journey together. On today's program, we have an incredible guest with us whose story will hopefully provide a great deal of information, encouragement, and inspiration. She is a single mother of 2 adult children, a very active volunteer with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, a blogger, as well as a stage 3 pancreatic cancer survivor, and is joining us today from her home in Atlanta, Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Teona Ducre to the show. Teona, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for having me this evening. It is great to be here. I'm excited.
Well, thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your busy day to share your story with our audience. And if you're ready, let's get started. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So Teona, before we get into talking about your cancer journey, why don't you take a few moments to tell us about yourself, like where you're from, what your life was like, what your work and interests were, and a little about your family prior to your cancer experience.
Sure. Again, thanks, Jim, so much for having me here tonight. When I got diagnosed, it was 2016, April Fool's Day, no less. But before that, I had a pretty normal everyday life. I was a teacher. I was a special education teacher. I was a single mom. I had 2 kids. At the time of my diagnosis, my daughter was 13 and my son was 15. So middle schooler and a sophomore in high school. And for the most part, my life was kind of basic. I was a football mom and I did all kinds of things with the football team for my son, and then just hanging out with my kids most of the time. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I was born and raised there, and my parents still reside there today, as does my uncle. So really, my life wasn't all that exciting. I had done a few things in the media prior to going into teaching. So that was my original career. And then once I had kids, that wasn't the most ideal situation. So I became an educator. And that's for the most part what I was doing leading up to 2016.
Okay, wonderful. What was your overall health like in the years prior to cancer?
So when I got diagnosed, I was only 41 years old. And I would have to say I was actually a pretty healthy person. I didn't eat a whole lot of junk food. I was, relatively healthy. I stayed active. The running joke when I got diagnosed from my family, my kids especially, and even my oncologist was, Teona, you're really healthy, but you have this darn tumor that's kind of messing things up for you right now. So I think that I had a pretty active lifestyle, and that's part of the reason why nobody was really looking for pancreatic cancer when I got diagnosed. Nothing about me and my profile really fit what people thought somebody with pancreatic cancer would be. So it was completely unexpected. And I was misdiagnosed like twice, actually, during the process of trying to get an appropriate diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Well, what caused you initially to think that something might be physically wrong with you? Were there certain symptoms you were experiencing, or what can you tell us about that?
Sure. So as a lot of people might know, the symptoms for pancreatic cancer are incredibly vague. And most of the time, the reason why people are diagnosed so late is because not only are the symptoms vague, but most of the symptoms don't start until much later when the disease has started to progress. So usually around stage 3, stage 4 is when a lot of people really start to notice the symptoms. And I was stage 3 when I got diagnosed. The very first thing that I had noticed was I had this lower back pain that over time became excruciating. It just became unbearable. But for years, and yes, years, not months, for years, I had been going to a chiropractor and getting massage, thinking, it's just my back. I may have pulled a muscle at some point. But the pain got worse over time. When I finally did go to the doctor, I had started experiencing very severe abdominal pain. And on top of that, I was having a lot of nausea. I had actually started vomiting, and I was just not feeling well. And my teaching partner, a very good friend of mine, one day in class, she said, you don't look good. And she said, I think you need to go to a doctor. And it was March of 2016 by that time. And I had said, no, I'm fine. I'm feeling a little under the weather. But she had noticed that I was just, for weeks, I wasn't feeling good. And she finally convinced me to go to a doctor. I was getting ready to go out of town to see my daughter, who was still living in New Mexico at the time. And I stopped by like a urgent care minute clinic kind of thing, very briefly. And I just said, hey, I'm having some stomach pain. They said probably acid reflux, maybe IBS, gave me some medicine. I literally went and jumped on a plane. And I just remember that plane ride being excruciating. I was horribly sick. I had the chills. I had a horrible stomach ache that was just making it unbearable. I went through the weekend. I came back. I called the doctor again and I said, hey, listen, I'm not getting better. The doctor said, come back in. Let's test you for an ulcer. They did a H. pylori blood test. On the way out of the doctor that day, the doctor called me back in to her office before I even got to the lobby. And she said, Teona, I noticed that you've lost a couple of pounds since our last visit and you're running a low-grade fever. I'm going to order a scan. I said, okay, no problem. I didn't go get the scan. She called me the next day and said, hey, I really need you to get this scan. Not sure what's going on, but I really do need you to get the scan. And by the time I went and got the scan, I had lost several more pounds from the day before. And unexplained weight loss is one of those symptoms that for anybody, if you're not trying to lose weight and you're suddenly losing weight and you're rapidly losing weight, that is always an indicator. Stop what you're doing and get to a doctor right away. But at any rate, I went in and got the scan, and within a couple of hours, she called me back and said, hey, Teona, it's not an ulcer. Normally wouldn't do this over the phone, but there is a very large mass. It's roughly 7 centimeters and it's covering almost the entire tail of your pancreas. Need you to get to a doctor like immediately.
Wow.
And in my naivete, I said, well, first of all, what's the pancreas? Where is that at? And what could this be? And she said, Teona, yeah, your pancreas, that could be cancer. And I was just stunned. I didn't even know what to say. That was on April Fool's Day. It was April 1st of 2016.
Wow. So, you had went in for this scan. Was it like a PET scan or a CAT scan or?
At the time, it was just a CT scan.
Okay.
One of the things I remember noticing was I recognized that I had lost weight because when I was at a very fancy CT place, that was all they did was CT scans and MRIs, imaging. And when I laid down on the imaging machine, my weight popped up and I was like 4 pounds less than I was the day before. And when I had gone to the doctor the day before, it was a late day appointment. It was like at 5 o'clock. And I just remembered, I thought, well, that can't be right.
Wow.
It was early in the morning. I thought, well, gee, maybe I didn't eat breakfast, but that was very alarming that I was like 4, maybe 5 pounds less than I was just less than 24 hours ago.
So at that point, they determined there was a mass and your doctor recommended the next step of getting the mass. What did they do at that point with the mass?
So the recommendation, and remember, I was at an urgent care clinic, so it was just kind of like a internal medicine family practitioner doctor. She said, you need to get to like a specialist. I'm going to refer you to a specialist. I went to that specialist like the same day. And he said, I looked at your imaging. I think it's just a cyst, very large cyst, but not cancerous at all. Oh, wow. It just happened to have been spring break. So everybody was on spring break at the time, including the actual specialist that would have worked with me on this. I had seen his partner, who he said this wasn't his area of expertise, but he said, looking at the scan, looks like a cyst. You're young, no previous health problems, no history of cancer in your family. You're fine. Go home, enjoy spring break, come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll relook at this. My mother, thank God for mom, she said, I don't like that. And she said, let's find another specialist. And I spent all of spring break looking for somebody that would be able to look at my images and see me and give me a second opinion.
Okay.
So I did find somebody, thankfully, a wonderful group of doctors at Emory Winship took one look at the scan and said, this is cancer, 99.9% sure it's pancreatic cancer, despite your age and all the other stuff. This looks like a malignancy.
Wow.
And at that point, the options were surgery or chemo. When it went before the tumor board, And all of this happened very, very rapidly. But when it went before the tumor board, they decided it was inoperable because of the size alone. They said I wouldn't make it through surgery.
Wow.
So at that point, I got diagnosed with stage 3 adenocarcinoma, inoperable, locally advanced. And the decision was made that I would do chemo first in an effort to shrink the tumor, and then they would try surgery within about 6 months. And that was actually what we did, and it was successful. At the time in 2016, getting chemo before surgery was not necessarily standard of care. It was something they were trying to see, but there were better outcomes. Some of the research suggested that there were better outcomes by shrinking the tumor first and then going in to have surgery. So that was the option that we went with.
Okay. So backing up a moment here, you mentioned that your mom encouraged you to go and get the second opinion and so forth. Was your mom with you, or were you doing this kind of over the phone, or were you with anyone when you found out from the second group of doctors exactly what it was?
So I had a friend with me, but I'm not from Atlanta originally. I'd only been in Atlanta for a few years by the time all of this happened. So I did have a friend with me. That graciously, came with me to the doctor because we kind of already knew like something's probably not right. So my mom was back in El Paso. We had talked over the phone a lot, both my mom and my stepdad. We talked over the phone a lot in those days after I got the original scan, and just really talked about what options are available. At the time, again, because pancreatic cancer did not have the best outcomes, there weren't a lot of options available. There weren't a lot of clinical trials. I don't even think I knew what a clinical trial was at the time, but I kind of educated myself and found out a little bit more about it, but that wasn't an option for a variety of reasons. One of the things, though, was that I honestly was very taken aback by the statistics at the time. In 2016, the 5-year survival rate for a pancreatic cancer patient was 7%, single digits. That was for a maximum of 5 years. And I just remember seeing that like within the first couple of days, and I couldn't even go on the internet anymore because I was terrified of what I was reading. And I just kind of didn't want to know at that point how bad it really was. And I remember thinking, gosh, 5 years, that's not enough time to do anything. My daughter was 13, my son was 15. I was thinking about them graduating and all the things that parents think about, and 5 years was not enough time to do any of that. My initial prognosis, though, wasn't even 5 years. It was 21 months, I believe. And kind of the conversation was, if we're able to shrink the tumor, if we're able to get you to surgery, if you live that long, you'll have a good chance of making it. But those were all big ifs. And fortunately, I was able to get through all the big ifs, and I celebrated 5 years in remission on November 16th of this year.
Wow. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. That's awesome. Fantastic. So I can tell you're a very strong and dynamic person, but take us back to when you found out your friend was with you. Tell us about your emotions just right when you really found that out. You've alluded a little bit to it, but what was that moment like?
Yeah. So going back to April 1st, it was kind of a funny story. It was the first day of spring break. I had plans. I was actually going on a date that day. And it was just such an awkward situation because I just remember getting off the phone with the doctor and saying, okay, thank you very much for calling me. I'll follow up as you've suggested. I had a friend at my house and I said, oh, so apparently they think I have pancreatic cancer. Let's go to lunch. That was my initial response. I think it was like shock.
Right. Yeah, sounds like it.
And it was really weird because I had a wonderful medical team. They were kind and compassionate and so knowledgeable. And I had people around me who were so helpful. One of my good friends was a nurse, and she was one of the football moms. And everybody was kind of just surrounding me and helping me from day one. So I had a wonderful support network, and I know a lot of people don't have that. And I was very fortunate to have the people that I had in my life. So by the time I got to the day where it was the official diagnosis, and Teona, you have cancer and this is happening. Everything happened very quick from that point. It was, you're going to get a port and, you're starting chemo. But when I was sitting in the doctor's office and he said, yeah, pretty sure this is cancer, I don't think it's a cyst, I just remember looking around the room for a minute and thinking, oh my God, is this really happening? It was the most surreal, bizarre feeling I've ever had in my life. But my initial response was, okay, what are we doing? Let's get the treatment. Let's figure out what we need to do. Let's get on the ball with this. It wasn't until probably a couple of months later, maybe that's not true, a couple of weeks later, I remember I was in my house by myself and I was laying in bed and I had a literal panic attack. And I thought, oh my God, I'm getting ready to die. My children are young. I'm single. I don't have life insurance. And it was just a flood of emotions hit me, everything from anger to extraordinary fear like I've never felt in my life. And I called my mom. And I remember laying in bed and crying on the phone. And I said, Mom, I'm really scared, but what are we going to do about the kids? I just want to know they're going to be okay. Who's going to take care of them? Where are they going to go? Where's the money going to come from? And my mom, being my mom, she was like, everything's going to be okay. If it doesn't go the way we want it to, we've got the kids. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. And then I felt better after that. And I was able to kind of go forward and do treatment and, all the things that were required of me to get to today, to get to 2021 cancer-free.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you dealt with the emotions head on and then took action to get to where you are today. So that's wonderful. Now, you mentioned starting out with the chemotherapy treatments and so forth. Were you able to do that in the town that you lived in, or did you have to travel to where you had your treatments? What was that like?
Right. That's a great question. So I was very fortunate. Atlanta being a major city, I had access to multiple treatment centers. One of the things I mentioned is, I was a single mom, I was a teacher, and, financially that didn't lend itself to being able to travel someplace like a Sloan Kettering or Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, all of those really big clinics that are out there that have some of the best treatment options, including clinical trials available. So for me, that was not an option, just strictly for financial reasons. Plus my son was home with me. And I wasn't going to be able to be gone for, 6 months and, wherever doing treatment. So I was very fortunate and I had treatment right here in Atlanta at Winship Emory. I was at the St. Joe's campus in Dunwoody, and it was probably 20 minutes from where I lived at the time. And it was a phenomenal treatment facility. Every physician that I dealt with was amazing. The nurses were wonderful. And I had a really positive experience being able to stay home. And that was part of my choice too. I think for everybody, everybody has different options available to them and things that are important. For me, it was important to be home. I really needed my life to have some sense of normalcy. My son was playing football, and our football family at the time, we were so close. And the moms and the dads and the coaches and the players, that was part of my routine that I didn't want to give up. I wanted to be there, for Thursday night football and be at the stadium every day after practice, just like I had been in the months leading up to it. I was the team photographer. So the whole time I was in treatment, I was still at every football game taking pictures. Every football game. We spent the summer kind of on the road doing 7-on-7s, and I made sure that I was there. But that was important for me because it's what kept me grounded. Being around my friends kept me motivated and hopeful. Being in my home and sleeping in my own bed every night was comforting for me. So the idea of going away for treatment just wasn't something that was financially available, and it wasn't just personally appealing.
Well, it's great that you had the treatment facilities right there in Atlanta that you didn't even have to think about that. And sounds like part of what got you through the whole experience may have been able to staying involved with your son's football team and the family around that, and being the photographer and so forth. So did that kind of help give you something to strive for and kind of a goal in a way to be able to get your mind off of the treatments and so forth that you were going through?
Yeah, it really did. Again, I was so fortunate. I'm always cognizant of the fact that I was in a situation that so many people are not. There happened to be a neighbor in the community that I lived in, an older gentleman who also had pancreatic cancer, did not have family. The neighbors were checking on him and stuff like that, but he didn't have family. I think he was probably like in his 70s. And people, I think that sometimes when people have cancer, it can be really hard to be around. And I was fortunate in that I had this wonderful group of people. I had personal friends that are like family to me. I was never alone. Even though I was single, I was never alone. My child was never alone. My son was never alone. My daughter was in New Mexico with her dad, so she had support as well. And I think that, to your point about staying motivated and giving me something to do, I was still continuing to work part-time. I was very involved in my community activities. I became involved with PanCAN, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, as a volunteer. I was doing lots of speaking engagements. I was blogging. And I think all of those things are what I needed at the time to stay motivated. One of the things that I think can happen that we don't always talk about as cancer survivors is there is this feeling of almost being left out of society, in particular with pancreatic cancer. I remember when I would tell people would literally gasp, and then some people would start crying, and it was like, oh my God, well, why are you crying? What's wrong? And then I realized people just assumed I was going to die. The statistics were that bad that if I said I had pancreatic cancer, people that I knew, people that I didn't know would go, oh no. And it's like, then they would just like lament for a moment. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm right here. I'm not dead yet. And me staying so involved was a way to remind myself that I haven't died. I am here. I'm still useful. I can still do things. And it was very healing for me to be able to get up every day and have something to do.
Sure.
And I know that not everybody can do that. I mean, the treatment is brutal. You feel sick all the time, but it was what got me up out of bed every day.
Now, let me ask you a personal question. Did you happen to lose your hair because of the treatments that you went through?
I did. And that's such a great question. There are several milestones that happen on a cancer journey that make cancer real. For me, getting the port was one. When I had to go in and get the port, and I looked down and there was this little thing sticking out of my chest. I was like, oh my God, what is that? I look like a cyborg or something like that. That was kind of like the first thing that I was like, ooh, this is really happening. I'm really getting ready to get chemo. Second big thing was losing my hair. And in part because I'm vain, I was really afraid of losing my hair, and it's finally grown out. I had a lot more hair then than I do now. But I had a very good friend that the year before me had cancer, and I kind of went through that journey with her, my friend Liz. And one of the things that was recommended to her was cut your hair really short before it all falls out. And I remember watching her go through that process of losing her hair, and she did cut her hair short, but it kind of did it, it wasn't quick enough. And I just remember going, oh my God, this was so traumatic. So then when I was in the same situation a year later, one of the first things I did was I went and cut my hair really, really, really short. And I just didn't want to watch it fall out, because every day I would go and I would brush my hair and I would see it, all over the sink. I remember running my hands through my hair and just big clumps of hair being in my hand. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. So I went and cut it. And then about a month and a half later, because I had like bald spots starting to come in, I just called a very good friend of mine, a guy friend that I had. I was like, I need you to get rid of all of it. And he just shaved it all off. I put it on Facebook, I put it on social media. We recorded it and everything like that. I was like, hey guys, going bald. Here it is. And I chose not to. I wore wigs in the very beginning, like when my hair was kind of spotty before I shaved it. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to own all of this. I am going to be bald and proud and enjoy not having any hair to deal with for however long this is going to last. So there's lots of pictures of me and stuff like that where I sported this very bald, shiny head for a year almost.
That's wonderful that you had the self-esteem to be able to do that. And, it's kind of a stigmatism that goes with being a cancer patient. I lost my hair both times that I had Hodgkin lymphoma cancer. And you just feel like everyone's staring at you, but the good news is almost all cases, the hair does grow back. So, it's something we put an extra kind of burden on ourselves, I think, as cancer patients, worrying about that. And it's a big thing, but I'm very proud of you that you just went ahead and were proud to be bald. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I always say, okay, I might go back to that just for the ease of it. But there were women when I was in treatment. There was a woman that was kind of in the bay next to me, and she would ask me, like, I don't know how you do it. She says, I can't even let my husband see me with my bald head. And I think I recognize the emotion that goes behind it, because whether you're a male or female, whatever your ethnicity is that defining moment that I really do have cancer. This is what people look at. And kind of the interesting thing was when people would see me bald, like, people didn't ask me, oh, do you have cancer? Like, some people just thought, oh, you've just voluntarily shaved your head. You know what I mean? So it didn't feel as stigmatizing when I actually did it. I think it was kind of like the anxiety of thinking this is what people are going to think, and now they're going to know because I knew. But then I had a totally different experience. Once I was in remission, like, I posted pictures of my bald head and I was on a dating website and, people still ask me out. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Sure. And that's just a great story for others to learn from. That's wonderful. Now, some of the other things sometimes are your taste buds change, different things like that. Did you experience any of those type of side effects?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the worst side effects, actually, that I remember, was losing my taste buds. And the chemo causes, like, I think they call it like metallic mouth or metal mouth, which makes it hard to eat, for one. And then the other part of it is I love food. So having a gastrointestinal type cancer was devastating on many levels, because I love to go out to eat. My family loves to, we love food, we love to cook, we eat out a lot. And it was a social thing around eating. And for like a year, I couldn't eat hardly anything. So between the metal mouth and just everything constantly making me sick. And I remember also, like, your mouth actually goes numb. Like, I couldn't feel my lips anymore after a couple of months of chemo. And I was actually on chemo for almost a year. So that was horrible. And I just remember the first day, like, I could actually taste something again. It was like, it was like the best day ever, because I was like, yay, I could taste this. And my mouth wasn't sore and all of that kind of thing. So that was a good day. And I still remember it. Absolutely.
That it all eventually comes back most of the time. And that is a nice experience when you can start, when a hamburger tastes like a hamburger again and all that. So you had mentioned previously your treatments were chemotherapy to try to reduce the size of the mass and so forth. Were there additional treatments beyond chemotherapy, or was that were they able to take care of everything just with the chemotherapy?
So I only had chemotherapy. I didn't do radiation, and I did surgery. So I did 6 months of FOLFIRINOX. It was the 5-FU little cocktail that's considered standard of care. It's like 5 different types of chemo. It's a platinum-based chemotherapy, and it is very strong chemotherapy. The side effects are, they're rough. A lot of people actually don't make it through. I did 12 rounds. And I remember at one point my white blood cells had dropped so low that we had to kind of take a little break. And then I went back and did more. So by the time I got to surgery, the chemo did work. It successfully shrunk the tumor to where they were able to operate and get the remainder of it through, removing what was left of the tumor surgically. After that, and this is kind of something that I think is a little bit unique to pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, because there's not a lot of survivors, there isn't a lot of data to support what comes next. So after I had surgery, I literally remember going in for my first appointment after surgery with my oncologist. And he said, well, kiddo, you did it. Yay. I have no idea what comes next because most people don't make it this far. And that was like disconcerting. I mean, it was like, yay, I made it, but it was also disconcerting because nobody knew what to do. When I went into chemo, my oncologist didn't share this with me until later, but there was like 4 or 5 other people that started about the same time I did. And in January of 2017, which was, like 7 months later after I had started chemo, none of them had survived. Oh. And I was I was the one that was left that had pancreatic cancer. And he said, I don't know what to do next. He said, I'm researching it. And he said, let's do some extra chemo for good measure. And I did. I did an oral regimen of chemo, and then I went in and got a weekly infusion. It was, I think it was Abraxane and Xeloda was the oral chemo that I took, and that lasted about 4, maybe 5 months. I stopped because I got an infection in my port, and I didn't want to get the port put back in, and I was having some really bad side effects. And I said, listen, I think it's enough. We've done everything we can do. Now let's just wait and see what happens. I've heard a lot of cancer survivors, in particular with pancreatic cancer, that say when you stop getting the chemotherapy, you're so nervous about recurrence that you almost rather keep going with it because at least you're doing something. And I did have a little bit of that where I thought, okay, but now I'm not doing anything. How dangerous is this for a good long-term outcome? But the decision was made that I was in remission. I was fully cancer-free, and there was no need to continue on with radiation or any type of oral treatment at that point.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, you had mentioned earlier that you were able to work part-time. How did, once you had your surgery and that sort of thing, were you still able to work some and earn some income? Or, I know a lot of people struggle with that because they're not able to work at all. Tell us about your work experience through the latter part there.
I love that question because just recently I was talking to another cancer survivor about this idea of what comes next. For so many people that have cancer, not everybody's able to work. And I think as the demographics of pancreatic cancer in specific change, people are getting diagnosed younger and younger. It's one thing to get a cancer diagnosis when you're like in your 70s and maybe you're kind of already retired versus you're in your 30s and your 40s and you have all this time left to be able to work, but maybe you can't work full time like you used to, or maybe you want to do something different, right? In my case, I had to go back to work because unfortunately my employer was going to end my insurance. I was out of FMLA. I had been in treatment for quite some time, since the year before, and they notified me. They said, hey, listen, if you don't come back to work, you are going to lose your health insurance, and there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, that was hard. So these are some of the things that happen when we're thinking about long-term survivorship and just cancer in general. What happens to all of those pieces? Like, how are you earning your income and how are you paying for your medical bills and everything else that you've amassed during this time that you've been in treatment? I went back to work, and my employer was flexible in the sense that I was kind of working like not quite full time. And I was a teacher, and they kind of put me in a different position. I wasn't like in the classroom teaching anymore. I was doing some other things just to be able to go to work and get the hours so I could keep my insurance. I was on disability on top of that. Disability, kind of the way that it works is you have a period of time through their right to work program where you can continue to work as much as you want, make as much income, but still get your disability check. So I was kind of like stockpiling, the money because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that forever. And then eventually I went part-time because I just was not able to really sustain the level of stress and being on my feet all the time the way I was prior to cancer.
Sure.
The fatigue, and I'm sure you know this, the fatigue after having cancer, I'm at 5 years now. I don't know. I'm not sure how long you've been in remission, but I'm at 5 years now and I'm still tired. I still need a nap in the middle of the day, which is not how I used to be before cancer. So those are some of the challenges that I think that we have, and that we have to think about these things for cancer survivors, because with so many people continuing to get diagnosed, we got to think about how are we going to be able to support this population of people who may not be able to work full time anymore, but
sure.
they still have skills and are able and want to work.
Right. Well, it was wonderful that your employer was willing to work with you on that. So you have to be thankful for the small things in life. And
right.
Yeah, it's been a number of years for me since remission, but the second time. It's been 19 years actually, and I'm very
That's awesome. That. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I still love a nap in the afternoon. So, my wife says, "How come you take so many naps?" I'm like, "Well, I was a cancer patient. I still never got quite back to the routine of not needing a nap." So, anyhow, but yeah, it does kind of wear you down, especially when you're in the midst of it and or recently, in remission and so forth. It just takes a toll on your body. So when you found out that your cancer, there was no evidence of cancer, and so technically you were in remission, but your doctor said, "Hey, let's keep doing some more chemo just to be safe." Did you have any relapses after that point in time?
I didn't, thankfully. We've had a few scares here and there over the last 5 years, but knock on everything that I can knock on, I've been in remission with no recurrence. And that is huge because the statistics, and it's kind of funny because I try not to listen to the statistics too much, but sometimes they are relevant. Statistically, at the 5-year point for cancer survivors and specifically pancreatic cancer, the odds increase monumentally that you'll be able to be cancer-free, going forward. So I was really excited for a number of reasons to make it to this November 16 of 2021, because that was kind of the date on the calendar that said, okay, if you get this far, you're home free, So I'm sticking to that idea that I got to that point and I'm not going to have to worry, but I still go in, as part of, my treatment plan, my follow-up treatment plan, I still go in and I continue to do surveillance. I see my oncologist. It had been every 3 months up until I hit that 5-year point, and now it's every 6 months. We continue to check blood work. With pancreatic cancer, it's very important to look at blood sugar levels because diabetes can unfortunately develop. I had a big chunk of my pancreas removed, so I'm not producing insulin and enzymes and things like that the way that my body normally would. So I'm under a lot of surveillance just to make sure I'm no tumors have developed and that nothing has changed there, but also to make sure that I don't develop diabetes.
Well, that's very prudent to, keep doing the checkups and so forth. So now that you're in remission in 5 years, so it came at a kind of a good time right before Thanksgiving there, November 16th. So I'm sure you have a lot to be thankful for every day and especially that time of year every year. What can you tell us about your involvement with PanCAN and the volunteer work that you do there and the other things that you're doing?
Sure. So I think I kind of said this earlier. I started as a volunteer with PanCAN about 3 weeks after I got diagnosed. I Googled pancreatic cancer and the PanCAN website came up, and that was actually my starting point for figuring out how to even get a second opinion. PanCAN Patient Services really helped me navigate that system, and then also even helped with things like, how can I get Social Security and those types of things. The organization is really wonderful in that regard. So I started volunteering with them as a way stay busy. I had a background in the media previously. That's my undergraduate work that I did was in broadcast journalism, and I had worked in newspaper and marketing and PR and television and all these kinds of things. So I kind of said like, hey, this is a skill set I have. I don't use it anymore, but if you ever need somebody that you want to do any speaking engagements or anything, I'm happy to do it. So right away, they took me up on that offer, and I started doing a series of interviews. I did a few national television interviews. I did some local interviews here in Atlanta on air things as well as print. There was a few magazines that picked up the story. So those were some of the things I was doing, but I was also in the role of Atlanta affiliate chair, which was really kind of running our local affiliate here and working with our volunteers locally in Atlanta. And then after that, I started getting asked to do more events. I met who is one of my closest friends now, Maria Fendora, and she is the founder of an organization called Purple Pansies here in Atlanta, which is also an organization that donates substantial amount of money here locally for patients with pancreatic cancer and their families, as well as donating to research to try to find better outcomes for pancreatic cancer patients. And Maria asked me to become part of her organization and be a speaker at her gala that she hosts every year. And I didn't do it this year because I was out of town, but I promised her I would be back next year. But I started speaking at their events as well. So there's lots of stuff that I do on a voluntary basis, but one of the biggest things that I really try to do is create awareness for the disease, in particular in the Black community, because pancreatic cancer impacts African Americans more than any other racial or ethnic group. And our outcomes, like it is kind of across the board with any illness, the outcomes for pancreatic cancer when it comes to the Black community, they're dismal. And we're getting diagnosed more. That was honestly the only trait or characteristic that I had that made me somebody that would have pancreatic cancer, is that I was Black. And it's just amazing because it has nothing to do with biology or anything else other than just social factors and economic sometimes, or things around what information we have access to. So part of what I'm really committed to is having an opportunity and a platform to talk to the Black community, or just to talk to people in general and say, hey, listen, these are the symptoms. And whether you think they're small symptoms or not, go to your doctor. I think some of the conversations we have to start having is why Black Americans, not just why are they getting diagnosed more, but why don't they have access to the information so that they know what the symptoms are, so they know where to find out about clinical trials. That's something that is a huge priority to me because I see how my community is being impacted by this disease more so than any other ethnic or racial community. And that's something that I really want to try to impact, if I can, through lending my voice and through lending my experience as much as possible in the community. This week, we actually just lost somebody in our community. A couple of years ago, we lost Senator John Lewis, unfortunately, to pancreatic cancer. On, I believe it was either Monday or Tuesday, we lost one of our music legends here, a DJ, Gary Mitchell. He was a DJ who had been here a very long time, over 20 years, and he lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. So I want to send lots of love to his family and to his loved ones and friends, because he was an icon here in our city. And another African-American gentleman got struck by this disease and now he's gone. So I'm hoping that if I have a platform to speak to people, that in particular, I'll be able to talk to the Black community so that we can learn what to look for, so that we're not, on the tail end of finding out what pancreatic cancer is.
Well, I'm so honored to have you share your story here on our platform today, and hopefully everything that you have said will, help others that might find this interview somewhere out there in social media and on our website and so forth. Now, you also do some blogging, I understand. What can you tell us about that? Are you still real active with that, or was that more during your treatments, or what can you tell us?
Yeah. So that was, I started blogging during my treatments. I haven't done a lot since. I still kind of keep up with I have a social media page that I still do a lot of advocacy and awareness on my Facebook page, on my personal page. And then I also have Miss D's Groupies, which is also on Facebook. But I have a blog. It's called Healthful Life blog at WordPress. And what I did was I kind of chronicled my cancer journey. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I hope to start doing again is now I'm on the other side of it. So I wrote a lot during getting treatment, what it was like and what was happening. Because sometimes cancer is still this very hidden disease, and I don't know that people know what it's really, really like. So I wrote about experiences that I had while I was in treatment. Now I'm on the other side of it, and it's kind of like the to be continued life after cancer. Right. And that is a whole different, that's a whole different part of the experience and the journey. But it's still very much a part of my journey as is somebody that's had to live with the cancer diagnosis. And for the rest of my life, that will kind of be something that's always in my health history. Sure. So I would like to start writing and blogging again, just about this side of cancer and what it's like.
Well, when you're ready for that, I'll certainly be a follower and look forward to what you have to say, as I'm sure many of our audience will want to hear that while they're going through treatments and also after they reach remission as well. We'll have links to all of the resources that Teona has mentioned here on the interview today. Are there any other resources that you'd like to mention, Teona, before we start to wrap things up today?
Sure. Piedmont Oncology, Dr. Andrew Page also has a website and a foundation, and they are doing wonderful work as well. Every year, Dr. Andrew Page at Piedmont Hospital, he hosts and puts together the annual Pancreas Conference right here in Atlanta. And I'm fortunate because I get to host the survivor panel on that day. And wow. We'll do it again next year, but we have survivors that come and share their experience. So I'll be sure I'll get that information to you so you can share that as well, because the conference happens every November, and it's a great experience, not just for doctors. They come in and they share the latest and the greatest that's going on in early detection and treatment options, but survivors and caregivers come and have a platform to talk about their experiences, and every experience is different. So every year we try to have a diverse group of people that come and talk about their cancer journey. So we'll be sure to get that information to you.
Oh, well, that's terrific. That's great work you're doing, and good luck with being on the panel there. That's wonderful. Now, before we wrap things up today, Teona, I'd like to ask one final question. And imagine that you're speaking directly to a person who has just found out that they have some type of cancer, whether it's pancreatic cancer or some other type of cancer, but they've just found out that they have this diagnosis. What would you like to say to them?
Be your own best advocate. This disease is beatable. When I got diagnosed in 2016, the statistics were horrible, but I am here. There's hope. It's possible. I think to get to that, you have to equip yourself with the best knowledge possible. You have to be your own best advocate. Surround yourself with as many people that can be encouraging towards you as possible, because if you have encouragement, that also makes this journey just a little bit easier. And I think the last thing I would say, we didn't talk about this, Jim, but protecting your mental health through a cancer diagnosis is incredibly important. We always talk about the treatments and your physical body, but protecting your spirit, your emotions, and your mind, half the battle is fought in those spaces. So if you can be sure to address and attend to your mental health to make sure that part of you is healthy as well, you will be able to win against this battle, and you'll be able to fight. So I wish everybody good health, lots of joy, and lots of goodness in the coming year.
Well, that is certainly words to live by. And I just want to back up one second, because you mentioned the mental health, spiritual health, that sort of thing. Were there some specific things that you did that in those areas that helped you through your journey?
Yes. One of the things that I did was I I maintained this very positive mental health state, but so much of it was through saying and speaking positive affirmations. I actually had on my mirror in lipstick written every single time I went to chemo, I would write some positive, encouraging message up there. And like my mirror was completely full. Like I couldn't see myself anymore, but what I could see was messages that I was writing to myself on my mirror. And I was counting down to get to the surgery. Kind of my theme, since my son was in sports, I love sports, kind of the theme was, I said, so it's not chemo day, it's game day. And every day I would get ready like an athlete for game day when I would go get chemo. And I would really prepare my mind for the experience of everything that was going on around me. And I did surround myself with people that were incredibly encouraging and positive. I have the most wonderful group of women in my life. I have amazing friends that are supportive, and every single day they showed up for me. And I really, they know who they are. I appreciate them so much. On top of that, I think that I really tried to spend a lot of time encouraging myself, but also encouraging other people. So that was also part of the volunteerism that I was doing, is it was really helpful for me to be able to talk to other people that were maybe going through the same thing, some kind of cancer diagnosis, whether it was pancreatic cancer or not. And I tried to spend time in those spaces, just really being encouraging and positive. The only note I will say is that sometimes it's really hard to do that, and don't beat yourself up if you have a day or a few days or a month where you don't feel real positive or encouraged. Cancer is hard. It is probably the hardest thing anybody can ever go through. And when you're not able to stay positive, then surround yourself with people that can help boost you up. There's self-care, and then there's community care. And we need both of them to maintain a healthy outlook and to get better outcomes in life.
Absolutely. Well, that is excellent advice. And you truly are a person who inspires me, inspires others, I'm sure. And that's wonderful that you helped people while you were a patient yourself, and yet you were a caring enough person to give back and try and help others while you were going through treatments yourself. So hats off to you. And I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from you. I know I certainly have, and we're just so grateful to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. Thank you to you and Bruce for putting this format together. These are really important conversations, and the work that you guys are doing is awesome because it's bringing so much information to people, and I'm sure lots of hope too. So thank you both for doing this, and thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you very much. And for those of you listening, please take a moment and leave your comments below, and take a look at the description and show notes below with links to all of the valuable information that Teona has shared with us today. And if you found this information helpful, then please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together, and we wish you the very best outcome with your cancer journey. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you on down the road.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information, please visit us online at cancerinterviews.com. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you back here again next time on the Cancer Interviews Podcast.